Hello from Halifax. This is Joe with Joe to the World Creations, and today we're going to be making my keychain buddy crochet pattern. All the details for this pattern, such as the yarn used, the hook size, all the materials you'll need, as well as step-by-step written instructions, are available for free on my website, or you can purchase the ad-free print-ready PDF, and there are links to both in the description below this video. Right now, let's get straight to the video tutorial. So the first thing we're going to do is make a slip knot. So we're going to make a loop, pull the end through the loop, pull tight, place our loop on our hook, and once again, pull tight. Now we are going to chain 17. So that's 1, 2, 3. You go ahead and chain 17 and come back to the video and we'll do row 1 together. With 17 starting chains now complete, we're going to start row 1. For all of row 1, we are going to be working into the back ridge loops, which are these bumps along the back of the chain. And we're going to do that for all of row 1. So in the second chain from hook, that's the first one, that's the second one, we're going to slightly twist, working into the back ridge loop. First thing we're going to do in that second chain from hook is we are going to single crochet. So insert our hook and single crochet. Now we're going to single crochet into each of the back ridge loops all the way across the chain. So you go ahead, put me on pause, come back to the video when you have single crocheted into each of the back ridge loops all the way down the chain. So I'm nearing the end. I have one more chain to work into, and into that last chain I do the same thing, single crochet. So at the end of row 1, you should have a total of 16 stitches made across the row. Now we're going to start row 2. First thing we'll do is chain 1. Now we are going to rotate our work so that we can work along the bottom and into the chain stitches all along the bottom. So what I mean by this is just rotate your work like this so that the bottom is facing up. The first chain stitch we're going to work into is the one that's attached to the slip knot. So you can see this little bump right here is the slip knot. This is the back loop of that first chain stitch, and this is the front loop. We are going to be working into the back loop only. So we are going to insert our hook into the back loop only, and this one can be quite tight. So I've just inserted my hook into that back loop only, and now we're going to single crochet. Just single crochet normally. Now to make everything a little easier in terms of making sure you start and end at the right place and count your stitches correctly, I highly recommend putting a stitch marker into this first stitch that we've just done. So I just use a safety pin. Next, we're going to work into the next chain, and again, only working into the back loop. We're going to insert our hook into the back loop, and once again, single crochet. We're going to do this all the way across, working into the back loop only of every chain, single crochet. So you go ahead and do this and come back to the video when you're nearing the end, and we'll do the end of this bottom together. So far I have done 14 single crochet stitches since putting my stitch marker in that first stitch, and I've got 2 chains left to work in. So still doing the same thing, working into the back loop only, single crochet, and into that last chain, back loop only, and single crochet. So along the bottom here, which is now facing the top, we are going to have a total of 16 stitches now complete, with the first stitch being the one that has the stitch marker. Now we are going to rotate our work again so that we can work into the tops of the single crochet stitches that we made in the previous row. But first I want to point out that there is a chain right here, and we are going to skip that and work directly into the first single crochet stitch right here. And we are once again going to be working into the back loop only. So skipping the chain and working into the first stitch into the back loop only, we are going to make 2 single crochet stitches into that same stitch, into the back loop only. So 1, and into the same stitch, make another. Next, we are going to be doing the same thing over the remaining 15 stitches. Do the same thing in each stitch, working into the back loop only, single crochet. That counts as 1. Into the next back loop, single crochet. That counts as 2. You're going to do that a total of 15 times, which is going to bring you to the very last stitch. You go ahead and do that and come back to the video. After completing those 15 single crochet stitches, it's a good idea to quickly count the number of stitches that you have. So starting with this very first stitch, for this pattern, we're never going to count any chains. So the chain that we made to start the row does not count as a stitch. Start with the stitch that's with the stitch marker. That's 1. Count all the way around, and you should have a total of 33 stitches. As long as you do, final thing we're going to do to complete row 2 is we're going to work into the chain 1 that started the row, and we are going to slip stitch into it. So insert your hook into both loops of that chain and slip stitch. And that completes row 2. At this point, it's a good idea to measure your work. Your work should measure approximately 4 inches long from end to end and approximately 1 inch wide. Now we are going to start round 1 of the body. First thing we're going to do is chain 1. We are never going to turn while working on the body part of the pattern. Next, we are going to work into the first stitch, which is where this stitch marker is. So we're going to take this stitch marker out and work into this stitch. Into that first stitch, we're going to single crochet into both loops. So single crochet. Now we're going to place that stitch marker right back into the top of the stitch that we just made. Now we are going to chain 1, and we are going to skip the next stitch. In the following stitch, we're going to single crochet, and we're always going to work into both loops from now on. Now we're going to chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next stitch. We're going to do this all the way around. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next stitch. You go ahead and do that. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, single crochet into the next stitch, all the way around. And as you're nearing the end of the round, we're going to be working all the way around for this round. But when you're nearing the end, come back to the video and we'll do that part together. So I'm nearing the end of the round, but I wanted to show you that it's very normal for this part to curl up a little bit. And actually what we want to do is we want the top or the right side of the bottom that we just completed to actually be facing down. So I'm going to just shift this so that it is facing down and I'm working the right way. It doesn't make a difference. You can do this after the fact, but this does become the bottom of the keychain buddy. So this is just a good time to now position that correctly and continue working. So I'm nearing the end of the round, and this is the first stitch. As you can see, and this is why we put a stitch marker in, is it does get a little tricky to tell which one is the last stitch. So this is the first stitch, which is where the stitch marker is. What looks like a stitch attached to it is actually the chain 1 we made to start the round, and this thing beside it is actually not an official stitch. So we are not going to work into that. So if you can see, I've made a single crochet and I've chained 1 here. I have one last stitch to skip, and then my last stitch is actually the next one. So I'm just going to do what I've always done and just single crochet into it, and that is actually the last stitch. So count your stitches all the way around and only count single crochet stitches. So count only these, and you should have a total of 17 single crochet stitches all the way around. And then after, and to finish off, we've made our last single crochet stitch. We are now going to chain 1, and we are going to slip stitch into the top of the first single crochet stitch that we made, the one that has the stitch marker. So I'm going to leave the stitch marker in for now and just work around it. So I'm going to slip stitch into it, and everything is going to become a little more like a basket or a bag. Here we go, a little purse, because it's now going to be tight. And so that completes round 1. Now I'm going to take a quick second and weave in this loose end, and I'm going to weave it just along the bottom. I find it's easier to do this now before the body gets too high, and also so it's not in the way of this video. So now we're going to start round 2. I've left the stitch marker in on purpose so it's easy to find what we need to do next. So if you recall, the last thing we did was we slip stitched into the top of the first single crochet stitch made, which is right here. The next thing we're going to do is slip stitch into the first chain 1 space. Now you might need to pull your work a little bit apart to see where exactly this is. So here is the first single crochet stitch we made, and right beside it is a chain 1 that we made directly after it. So this becomes your first chain 1 space, and it's between 2 single crochet stitches, and that is where we are going to slip stitch into. So I'm going to take out my stitch marker, working into the first chain 1 space, which is right here. I'm going to slip stitch. Now I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to single crochet into the same chain 1 space that we just slip stitched into. Single crochet, and this becomes our first single crochet stitch of the round, and we are going to put our stitch marker into the top of this stitch, like so. Next, we are going to chain 1 and work into the next chain 1 space. And the next chain 1 space is between the 2 single crochet stitches from the previous row underneath a chain 1 that we've completed. So it's this space right here. Into the next chain 1 space, we are going to single crochet and chain 1. We're going to do this all the way around. Into the next chain 1 space, single crochet, chain 1. In the next chain 1 space, single crochet and chain 1. So you do this all the way around. Come back to the video when you're nearing the end of the round, and we'll do that part together. So I'm nearing the end of the round, and it does get a little tight, I find, on this round to see where a chain one space is. So I'm going to show you a trick. There should be 17 single crochet stitches completed in this round. So starting with the first single crochet, that's where the stitch marker is, that's 1. So count your stitches to see if you've made the correct number of single crochet stitches before finishing the round. So I've done 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 so far. I have 1 left to go. So I'm going to find the chain one space here. It always helps just to pull your work, and I can see, in fact, I have 2 single crochet stitches here with a chain one above them. So this is exactly where I'm going to single crochet into. So I've made sure I've done a chain one after my last single crochet into the next chain one space, single crochet. This was my last single crochet of the round. That was my 17th single crochet. After your last single crochet, so the one I've just done, you are not going to chain one. So this alternates for every other row from now on, but for this row, for row 2, you do not chain one after your last single crochet. What we do now is slip stitch into the top of the first single crochet stitch that we made. That's the one with the stitch marker here. I'm going to try to work around the stitch marker again and just slip stitch into that first single crochet stitch. And it is a little tight, it tightens things up a bit, but that is good. And that completes round 2. For round 3, the first thing we're going to do is chain 1. And next we're going to work into the top of the first single crochet of the previous round. So let's take out the stitch marker, and into that stitch we are going to single crochet. Now we are going to chain 1 and working into the first chain 1 space. So just to make sure you know exactly where that is, this is the top of the first single crochet. So this is not a chain 1 space. The first chain 1 space is between these 2 single crochet stitches from the previous round. So working into that chain 1, oh, I forgot one crucial step. I forgot, we've got to put our stitch marker back into that the top of the first single crochet stitch. Sorry about that. So our stitch marker is now in place. Okay, so just to back up, we've made our single crochet stitch, we've chained 1, and the next step is to work into the first chain 1 space, and we're going to single crochet. Then we're going to chain 1, working into the next chain 1 space, single crochet, then chain 1, into the next chain 1 space, single crochet, chain 1, and we're going to do this all the way around. So you go ahead and just single crochet and chain 1, and as you're nearing the end of the round, come back to the video and we'll do that part together. So I'm nearing the end of the round. Once again, as you get to the end, you may wonder how many more you need to do. So let's back up and count to make sure that we have 17 single crochet stitches now complete, starting with the first one that's attached to the stitch marker. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So I'm 1 short. So I've just made a single crochet. I'm going to chain 1, and into the next chain 1 space, we are going to single crochet. Now on this row, row 3, after our last single crochet stitch that we've just made, there is a slight gap, but this is technically not a chain 1 space and it does not get worked into. Plus, we've already made 17 single crochet stitches around, so we do not work into that. But we are, for this round, going to chain 1 after our last single crochet. So I've made 17 single crochet stitches after my last one, chain 1, and I'm going to slip stitch into the top of the first single crochet stitch we completed, the one with the stitch marker. Working around the stitch marker, slip stitch into that. And that completes round 3. So for rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7, you're going to be repeating round 2, round 3, round 2, round 3, until your work measures approximately 2.5 inches from the bottom, and it should be still 4 inches long. You're welcome to continue that repeat if you'd like the height to be a little higher. Just ensure that you finish after a round 3. After you've finished your last round 3, do not finish off. Come back to the video and we will do the strap together. I've just finished round 7, which was repeating round 3, and now we're going to start the strap. I'm going to remove this stitch marker for now. So my last stitch here is very close to the corner, and this is what I mean by the corner. If for any reason your last stitch is getting towards kind of the middle, we don't want the strap to be here. We want it to be in the corner. So an easy fix to that is just to turn and slip stitch into as many stitches as you need so that the strap is as close to the corner as possible. It doesn't need to be exact, but you don't want to have the strap not at the end here. We want the strap on the side. But my last stitch is pretty close, so I'm going to start the strap from here. First thing we're going to do to start the strap is chain 15. So 1, 2, 3, you go ahead and chain 15 and come back to the video. For row 1 of the strap, we are going to be working into the back ridge loops, which are the bumps along the back. We are going to work into the 4th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the 4th chain, slightly twist and work into the back ridge loop and into that 4th chain single crochet. This creates a buttonhole so that when we attach the button to the inside of the body, this is what will attach to the button. Now we're going to single crochet in each remaining back ridge loop all the way down. So you can go ahead and do that and come back to the video when you have single crocheted all the way down the chain. I have made 12 single crochet stitches so far working down the chain, but we want a total of 13. So there's 1 chain left, which is the one that's attached to the body, and we're going to work into that to make a total of 13 stitches. So this one's always tricky to find the back ridge loop, and I find for this one it doesn't really matter where you actually single crochet into, but I believe this is the back ridge loop. So I have 13 single crochet stitches now completed. Your work may have rotated as you're working on the strap, so just ensure that the outside of your work is facing you and you're picking right back off where you ended the last stitch when you completed a round 3. So you want to be in the exact same place. So that's where we're going to attach the strap, is now into the stitch that's attached to the chain on the purse body. So really picking up right where we left off, slip stitching into the body, into the same space or as the chain. And now we're going to make one more slip stitch in between the next chain 1 space. So in between the next 2 single crochet stitches, we're going to slip stitch. And now we're going to start the flap. For row 1 of the flap, the first thing we're going to do is chain 1. Now we are going to single crochet in the first chain 1 space, which is the same chain 1 space we just slip stitched into. So we're going to single crochet into that. Let's put our stitch marker into that stitch just to make sure we know where that is. Next, we are going to chain 1 and single crochet into the next chain 1 space. So the next chain 1 space is between the next 2 single crochet stitches. We're going to single crochet. We're going to chain 1. And we're going to repeat that a total of 5 times. So that was once. Let's do it again. Single crochet, chain 1, that's 2. Single crochet, chain 1, that's 3. Single crochet, chain 1, that's 4. And then finally, single crochet, chain 1, that's 5. And then to complete row 1, we're going to make one final single crochet stitch into the next chain 1 space. So single crochet. And now we should have a total of 7 single crochet stitches across row 1. And we're going to leave the rest of the stitches unworked. So 2, 4, 6, and then 7. Now we are going to start row 2. The first thing we're going to do is chain 2. 1, 2. And now we're going to turn. We are going to work in the first chain 1 space, and we're going to single crochet. And then chain 1. Then we are going to single crochet in the next chain 1 space and chain 1. And we're going to repeat that 5 times. So that was once. The next one, chain 1 or single crochet, chain 1, that's 2 in the next space. Single crochet, chain 1, 3 in the next space. Single crochet, chain 1, that's 4. And in the final chain 1 space, we are going to do that same thing. Single crochet and chain 1, and that's 5. To finish off the round, we are going to remove the stitch marker and we're going to make one single crochet stitch in the top of that single crochet stitch, exactly where the stitch marker is. So remove that and into the top of that stitch, single crochet. Across row 2, you should have a total of 7 single crochet stitches. So 2, 4, 6, and then 7. This is the chain 2 that started the round. That doesn't count. Just 7 single crochet stitches across row 2. To start row 3, we are going to chain 2 and turn. We are going to single crochet in the first chain 1 space, which is between the 2 single crochet stitches right here. Single crochet and chain 1. Then we're going to repeat the same thing 5 times, which is single crochet, chain 1, that's 1, single crochet, chain 1, that's 2, single crochet, chain 1, 3, single crochet, chain 1, that's 4, and finally single crochet and chain 1. The last space is a little different because we chained 2 at the beginning of the previous row, and we are going to treat that as a space that we are going to work into at the last part of the row. So it's between the last single crochet and the chain 2, we are going to single crochet into that. Across the row, you should have a total of 7 single crochet stitches. 2, 4, 6, 7. For rows 4, 5, and 6, you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to repeat row 3. You are welcome to continue repeating row 3 or make less of row 3. Just ensure to make an even number of rows. You come back to the video and we're going to do one final row, which is going to be, it's called row 7, but you're welcome to make more of repeating rows 3 before you do row 7. But come back to the video when you reach your desired flap height and we will do the final row together. So I've just completed row 6, which was repeating row 3. Now I'm going to start row 7, which to start we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and turn. In the very first chain 1 space, we are going to single crochet and chain 1. In the next chain 1 space, we are going to single crochet and chain 1. In the next chain 1 space, we're going to single crochet, and then we're going to chain 3, and this is going to create a buttonhole. So chain 1, 2, and 3. In the next chain 1 space, single crochet and chain 1. In the next chain 1 space, single crochet, chain 1. In the next chain 1 space, single crochet and chain 1. And in the final space, which is a chain 2 space, we're going to single crochet. Now we're going to fasten off. It just means to cut our yarn. I like to leave about a 6 or 8 inch tail. And pull our yarn through, and then take our yarn needle and we're going to weave in our loose ends. With my ends all woven in, first thing we're going to do is take a 10mm button and we are going to sew it on to the inside underneath the strap, right below in the crease, approximately 1 inch from where the strap begins, so that it's hidden and you can't really see it, but it's still there, so that when the strap becomes attached, it'll be about there. But you're welcome to put it lower, wherever you would like, but I put it 1 inch below the start of the strap. So go ahead and sew that on, but I do recommend working into just the backs of the stitches so that the thread doesn't come through the front. So don't put the needle all the way through, but instead just work into the backs of the stitches like that, so that the straps or the thread doesn't come through the front of the work. So I now have my button attached to the inside without any thread coming through the front. Now we're going to take a 20mm button and attach it to the front. And you can play around to see where you'd want this button to go. Obviously put it in the center, but you may want to put the button a little bit lower than right in the middle if you want the flap to be snugly closing the body. You may want to put it a little lower, or if you want the flap a little looser, you can put it right in the middle, and it does depend on how long your flap is. So you can play around with that to see where you'd like it to go, and just use your yarn and sewing needle to attach it. And with this one, your needle can go right through the work because that will go into the inside. So you can attach your strap now to the inside button, but that's easily removable. So you can be attaching it to a keychain, or you could attach it to belt buckle loops or anything really. And this is your new keychain buddy. It's perfect for holding credit cards or hand sanitizer, you name it. I hope you enjoyed creating this pattern. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.